Do you feel stuck? Like you want to change something in your life, but you just can't? In this talk, I'm going to talk to Philippa, who is a very experienced woman. She is also a life coach, and she's going to tell us her story and why you feel stuck and why you seem to be going through the same things over and over again and how to change that. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Philippa, who is going to share her story. And we were just talking about some things you were struggling with when you were young, when you were in your 20s, because you're obviously not anymore. But tell us about what you learned, what you went through when you were young.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me here today. It's really nice to be here talking to you. I think, I connected with you because you're talking about empowering women, and you're talking, mainly to women in their 20s and 30s. And yes, I'm definitely not there anymore. I'm 53 now, but I very vividly remember how confused and not empowered. I probably didn't even know that word in my 20s, but I certainly didn't feel empowered in my 20s and my 30s, really. In fact, I probably haven't felt empowered until my 50s. So I really like sort of sharing my story in the hope that it might, that it might help women see some of the things that I definitely didn't see until I got older, because that's a lot of years to feel like you're not really getting it, which is how I felt. So do you want me to sort of tell you a bit about me then?
Yes.
Yeah. So I God, where do I start? I was a lawyer for 27 years. So I went off to university, did law, never really intended to be a lawyer, but got a job quite easily. I was very lucky, got a job in a big London law firm, worked there. I've worked only around the UK, but worked in sort of big law firms doing property work.
Can I ask you something? Because you just said before that you didn't really want to become a lawyer. So what made you choose to become a lawyer?
Yeah, so I didn't really want to be a lawyer. You're right. I don't think I'm really, I've not got the personality that I saw was needed in a law firm. People have told me I've got too much life in me to be a lawyer, so I don't quite know what that means. But anyway, I grew up at home with a lot of trauma. I didn't recognize it as trauma and emotional neglect. I've only really come to accept that in my later years. But I never felt safe at home. I never felt that people would be looking out for me. I didn't feel that anybody would look after me. So I worked hard at school, and I went off to university, and I knew I was going to have to look after myself. So much as I never really intended to be a lawyer, when I got offered a job as a lawyer, it seemed a good way to be able to look after myself, that it was probably going to be a job for life if I wanted it.
It felt safe.
Yeah, it felt safe in that I suppose I equated money to safety.
Yeah.
So I was probably not going to, unless I did something really awful, I was probably not going to be out of a job, and I would earn decent money. I mean, I never got to the top, so I never earned the top money, but, don't get me wrong, I earned good money. So on one hand, this job that I chose to do, this career that I chose, did provide me with safety, because it gave me a career path, it gave me money. I suppose to some extent it gave me status. In the beginning, I thought it gave me status. In the end, towards the end, I used to say I worked in a law firm. I didn't actually say what I did. But on the other hand, it put me in a really high stressful situation, in an environment that I felt I couldn't be myself. So, and that was back in the 90s. It was back in the 90s when the first little lecture we get is, women must, you've got to wear skirts. You weren't allowed to wear trousers. So it was really, conforming, really. And I definitely felt I couldn't bring my personality to work. And I was a woman. There were a lot of women in the law by then, but there were certainly more men than women still. And I'm from the north of England rather than London or the south. And I didn't go to private school. And one of the first partners that I met in the law firm said to me, oh, not only do we have women here, we have northerners now, do we? And I was like really shocked. So it was another level of not quite fitting in that I sort of hadn't experienced before then. So yeah, on one hand, it's giving me this safety because I was equating money with safety. But on the other hand, I just never felt like I fitted in. I felt like I had to be something other than my true self, really. So I put a mask on, and that's how I survived. Yeah, and I stuck at it for a long time. Yeah.
So when did you realize that you had to change, or you wanted to change because you couldn't be yourself there? What made you want to work on that?
Well, I think in order to sort of stay in my career, I moved around a lot. I was a serial move jobs. I moved cities around the UK. I moved jobs. I always found it quite easy to get a job. So after the initial 3 years, I wasn't in a job any longer than 2 years. So that helped keep me going, because, you know, in a new job, there's a period of getting used to it. And then there's a period when you're leaving. So I was never really in the job, you know what I mean, head in it for a very long time. So I clearly now see that I was running away from something all the time. I was running away from the situation I was in because it didn't feel right, but I didn't really know why. So I just kept on running, hoping one day I would find the answer. And I reinvented myself a little bit along the way. I changed disciplines at one point. So I stopped doing property and started doing another area of law. Then I stopped doing that, and I went into management in the firm and was in risk and compliance. So I've reinvented my sort of what I've done along the way over the years. But what happened in the end was 2017, I lost a lot of the sight in my right eye, which was really devastating. I did get most of it back, so you know, it's not, but what happened is, as a result of that, I started unraveling. I really did. I had a breakdown, and I had to really have a good look at myself. And it was part of doing that that made me realize that the thing I'd been running away from all the years was me. So no wonder, and I could never outrun myself. So
impossible.
Exactly. No matter how hard I tried, I was never going to get away from me. And I think, you know, partly I was not far off 50. There were quite a few things that, you know, my hormones were all over the place. I'd been in a job for so long. I was really stressed in the job I was in at the time. My kids were getting a bit older, because the one good thing I did manage to do during this time was find a nice, decent man to get married to, and we have 2 children. Lucky. Yeah. And we have 2 children. Yeah. So, but I didn't meet him until I was 33. But what happened is I had to have a good long look at myself and how I'd got myself into this situation where I was really deeply unhappy. You know, on the face of it, it looked like I had everything. I had a good job. I got a nice house. I live in a nice city.
All the things that are expected.
All the things that are expected, absolutely. But inside, I was like numb. And just like this big gaping hole, really. And I think I began to realize that had always been there, which is when I had to start like looking at myself, looking at my life, looking at, you know, how I'd got to where I where I'd got to, all those factors that had played in, and actually what I really wanted. I mean, that was almost the toughest thing in a way. It was finding, okay, this is what you've got, but what do you actually want? So the last 5 years have really been me working out all those things. And I finally packed in my legal career in 2019. And yeah, it's brilliant. so much freedom. I feel much freer now that I'm not having to play a role that really I hadn't even realized I was playing. But no, I'm not having to play that role. I feel much more freedom to be me.
So the message in what you've just said could be something like, find out who you are, don't avoid yourself. Start working on yourself already in your 20s. Do what you really want. So find out who you are and then do what you want.
Well, I think part of what I do now is I'm a life coach, but I wrote my memoir. I spent most of last year, 2021, writing my memoir, because when I left therapy, I had 3 years of therapy to help me work out the past. And when I knew I wanted to write a book, so I wrote my life story. And a part of that, in order to work it all out in my mind, I had to do a timeline, because I was a bit jumbled about what happened when, and a lot of my family are not around anymore, so I can't ask them. And at the same time, I started a podcast, and my first season was talking to people in their 20s, because, I'd come across this book that was talking about people in their 20s feeling like they've got to have it sorted, like, know where they're going and just get on with life. Whereas actually in reality, it's the first time a lot of people have been away from home, being able to, or the home they grew up in, being able to explore the world for themselves. And actually it should be more, or it can be more of a time to try things out, rather than find the thing you're going to stick to. It's more try this, try that out. And as part of that, I talked to a lot of people in their 20s, because I wanted to normalize it. I wanted to talk to a lot of people in their 20s, so that the people who were listening to the podcast could understand that there's no one way of doing it. It is about trying things out. And it might be that you don't try things out in your career because you're dead set on what you want to do, but you try things out in your personal life and your social life. And, maybe you travel, maybe you try lots of different hobbies, maybe you try lots of different partners, maybe, whatever it is. And, or maybe you don't know what your career, what you want to do for a job. And maybe you try quite a few jobs out to try and see what works. But I definitely saw on my timeline that I didn't try the job out, because obviously I was on this career path for my legal career, but I didn't really try much else out either, because I didn't have the confidence to do that. I think my 20s were very tumultuous. I had like series of really disastrous relationships. I grew up with an alcoholic mother, so I ended up with 2 alcoholic boyfriends. The pattern repeated itself, and I just didn't see any of it. I just did not see that things that had happened growing up and how it had affected me and how it was influencing my choices. I just didn't get it until I, with the benefit of hindsight at 47, I could look back and go, oh, okay, that all makes sense now. So yes, sorry, going back to your question, I think the message is actually, think what is it that you want, really? I wish I'd come across somebody who was saying that message in my 20s, because even if I hadn't taken any notice of it, it would have been in my head. I think it would have been there in the back of my mind thinking, yeah, but is this what I really want? And is it possible that maybe I'm on the wrong track? And is it possible that there is something else for me that I don't know, might suit me better, might make my life more joyful, just might be something more than sitting in a stuffy office all day with a lot of other stuffy people doing doing a lot of paperwork effectively. So so it's definitely looking back and doing those things that I've been doing now in my new career that I can see how a lot of my life has played out on the back of my childhood trauma.
So about the trauma, the way I see it is, if you have something in your life, or your life is in a certain way right now that you don't want it to be, you have to change it. And a way to change it is usually to go back, like you say, to your childhood. Did you have parents who always were dominating or something like that, and you always find a partner who's dominating because that's what you grew up with, that's what you learned. This is safe, I know what this is, and this is what feels comfortable, even if we don't want it. That's just what we attract, what we accept. So we have to go work on something back there to change whatever we want to change in our life right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it can play out in ways that you don't necessarily initially see. So like,
usually it's subconscious, right? It's not something you know.
Yeah. And like, you know, your dad might be the same way, a certain way, for instance, and that plays out in a girlfriend, you know, and it's hard to see sometimes because of the change of gender. It's hard to see sometimes that how the dynamic is playing out. In my last job, I was the management team was 3 men and me. So I spent a lot of time sitting around the table with these 3 men, and it was only my therapist who pointed out that, and I was the one that wasn't listened to. And my therapist pointed out to me that I had 3 brothers and I was the only girl. And what was playing out around that table, that meeting table, room table at work, was very much the dynamic that worked at home. And I just didn't see that. So it is really... It is really interesting, but you're absolutely right that if something is not going well, or you can see a pattern starting to, for me, it was seeing the patterns. I've always put myself in a friendship group of 3, always, over the years, and then I will always feel left out. And I do that to myself over and over and over again, because I fundamentally have this feeling that I'm not enough on my own. So nobody would want to be friends with just me. So I have to bring somebody else in. And that's really interesting. When I worked that out, it was, well, I didn't work it out by myself. When I worked it out with the help of my therapist, it was so interesting to see how that had happened so many times over the years. So mine came down to a fundamental sort of feeling that I'm just not good enough. Ever.
So could you walk us through? Do you have some steps, or how did you notice that? How did you go through that experience, that learning of?
So when I lost the sight in my eye, I had no idea how much my past had been influencing my present. I used to say, yeah, my childhood was a bit rubbish, was rubbish, but that was then, and I've done okay now. And people would say, oh yeah, look, you have done okay, haven't you? And then you think, oh yeah, I can't admit that I'm not okay, because it looks like I'm okay and everybody thinks I'm okay, so therefore I should be okay, so keep quiet about not being okay. And I think when I finally admitted that I wasn't okay, which was the whole linked to the eye. I mean, I definitely believe that my body made that happen for some reason, because I had not listened to any other signs during the years. You know, my body was like, right, I'm going to give you this because you just can't, you're not going to be able to avoid.
You haven't listened for so long.
Absolutely. There are so many things that had happened in the past where I could have learned the lesson about needing to slow down, not having to prove my worth all the time, that I'm okay just as I am. You know, I am good enough just as I am here, sitting here talking to you today. This is it. I don't have to be anything else.
You don't have 3 people with you.
No, I'm here by myself. Exactly.
Yes.
I don't have, yeah, exactly. And that has been, I tell you what, that has been a massive revelation. But sorry, I'm digressing. You asked me, how did I work it out?
Did you have a process yet that you went through? What did
I'd
you
love
do
to
with
say
your
yes.
therapist?
I'd love to say yes. I had this 5-step process. So if you just
Yes.
follow that process, all will be well.
Just some ideas, or if you have some key points that were kind of this really helped, or this changed.
Yeah, I'm not sure my therapist actually ever said this to me, but when I finished therapy, I started doing a lot of learning myself. So I've sort of done a lot of self-coaching since, and I realized how much I've spent my life looking outside for validation. So and that comes down to the not feeling enough. So how could I tell myself I was enough? So I couldn't do that. I was looking outside for people to tell me that, yes, you've done a good job, or, yes, that's good, or, you're doing good, it's okay. And of course, I began to realize the more I'm looking outside, the more I'm at the mercy of other people. And other people have got their own things going on. Other people are not like, they're not mind readers. So they don't know that what they're saying is having what effect it's having on me. I mean,
and I think there's just one thing to be about that also, because they're not responsible for how you're feeling. That's really was a really, to me, it was kind of, I'm the only one that's responsible for my life and for my mood and for how I'm feeling and for growing and everything.
Yeah. And I think when I realized that my fate was in my hands, that was, which I know sounds really obvious, but I think because the way I'd grown up at home, I tried to be really a really good girl. I tried to, be the ultimate people pleaser, do anything that do things around the house before my mum even knew they needed doing. I tried really hard because I didn't feel safe. And so I'd brought that into my adulthood and felt that I had to be there for other people. I had to help other people all the time. Which actually I now understand is actually quite manipulative. I was behaving in a way that was trying to get a certain reaction or response out of other people, which is actually quite manipulative. And I found that really hard to take when I learned that after all these years of sort of putting myself right at the bottom of the list, actually my behavior is quite manipulative. But it makes sense given my lack of stable sort of childhood. When I realized that actually I'm the one that is responsible for my life, for my happiness, for the way I feel, I am the one that's responsible for that, and actually nobody else is responsible for it, like you say. That's when things really started to turn around for me. And I fell into all the books by Brené Brown. And it felt as I read those books, I was reading them at the time that was mirroring my process. It was interesting because I didn't start with the first one. I started with Daring Greatly and then went backwards. But she talks there about being vulnerable and being your true self and talking about the experience that you are actually having, not putting a gloss on it and, taking your mask off. And I sort of threw myself into that because I felt like I had nothing to lose, because I kind of felt like it was really pretty rubbish. So I had to do something drastic. So I felt that I sort of took my mask off and started to be much more honest about the way I felt about things, that the way I experienced life, the way I experienced my relationships with other people. And I mean, I was very careful about who I talked to about those things, because not everyone was going to get it. And I sort of tried, I walked very slowly and carefully into those sort of conversations. But I remember vividly going on a walk with a really old friend of mine, and she just said, oh, and I was telling her all this, and she said, thank goodness. She said, for years I've been waiting for you to be honest about about how you are. She said, knowing your background, I knew there was no way you could be okay, but I didn't know how to approach that with you. And she said, so to hear you now telling me how you are not okay, you know, makes me really happy in a way, you know. And I was like, oh, like, I kind of wasn't expecting that reaction. So I was lucky that that was one of the first reactions that I got, because that gave me the confidence to carry on. And some people didn't like it. When you change, you know, not everyone gets it. Not everyone. Some of my friendships wavered a bit, but I think that, yeah, they've all come back round now, really. But I found it quite hard to be a different way in my existing friendships. So in a way, the new friendships that I made, being the new me, were an easier place to be for a while. But now I look inside for, what do I think? What do I, you know, I don't know, say for instance, somebody's a bit fed up with something I've said. I don't know. But if I could look inside and go, okay, I understand why they're fed up. I understand that, whatever it is I've said, I know where it came from. And I am responsible for, you know, the effect it's had. I'm not saying I'm not responsible for that, but I know I'm not a bad person because I've upset them. There's something going on in our dynamic, and maybe I could have said it differently. They've got something going on for them. But that sort of thing would have shattered me in the past, and I would have just felt that I was a really bad person. But I don't anymore. So
and this is, I think this is basically when you hear, I've heard that at least the last few years a lot, taking back your power. This is what it means, like, not also what you described earlier about how you want to validate yourself from outside.
Yes.
When you take back your power, you don't need that. This is when you say, I'm okay as I am. I'm good enough. I don't need anybody to validate that. I know that it's true, and it's the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I work with people now, one of the first things we tend to look at, depending on what's going on, is where they're giving their power away, because you know, a lot of us do, or certainly my age group do. I can't speak for your age group, but I'm sure that, you know, things haven't changed.
There are a lot.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Maybe and not everybody, but yeah. Yeah.
And I talk a lot about energy. I'm starting to talk a lot more about energy. And actually, you know, if we have all our energy in us, you know, and that's what we need to be whole, when we are, you know, we're giving parts of it away. When our experience of life depends on other people and how they react to us and what they say and what they do, we are giving little bits of our power away. And the more little bits we give away, the less we have for ourselves. So, you know, so it's almost it's not literally, because it's not a real thing, but it is almost like, right, I've given you that power and I'm going to take that back now. I know, you know, I'm a good person, or you know, so I'm not going to let your opinion of me affect you like I have done. So I'm taking that bit back and that bit back. And, you know, I talked earlier about this big gaping hole, and I think that's what I did. I've slowly taken back all those bits and filled that hole up again.
Great, nice.
Yeah. Now I'm whole.
Yes, exactly. It's great. So kind of making it relatable, it could be like if you have an authority, a teacher, or someone you look up to, and you always want their opinion. You say, hey, what do you think about that? Or if they say to you, this is wrong, don't do it, then you take that in instead of listening to yourself and feel what's right for me, what do I want? And then, yes, you can get their opinion, but it's about doing what you feel is right, because they can have their opinion, but maybe it's not true for you.
Yeah. Yes. And, you know, there are times in our lives where we do have to do things that other people expect us to do or tell us to do, you know, be it at school, be it the way things work,
on a job.
Even, and the hardest one, I think, is in our family, in our birth family, you know, where there are certain ways that we are expected to be, or things are expected to happen, and we can feel that, you know, I don't I can't think of a classic example because I've just got millions of them, but I think mine's not necessarily a typical story. But and there are sometimes that we have to do that, and sometimes we do have to conform a little bit, or maybe do things a certain way, but that doesn't mean we have to give our power away to that person as well. So we can know inside that I don't like this, or I don't want to. I think quite a classic is wanting to talk about things that have happened and actually it not being allowed to talk. We don't talk about things. I think that's quite a classic
taboos
thing. Yeah. So for instance, my mum was an alcoholic, and it was never ever mentioned that my mum had a drink problem, and that she was an alcoholic. It was never talked about. And so the message there is that we would never, you just never mentioned it outside the house either. You know, nobody was to know outside the house what went on inside the house. And I did not like that. I mean, I now realize I'm a highly sensitive person. So, you know, I was processing it all on a really deep level and taking it in. I knew there was something not right, but I didn't really know what it was when I was very young. And as I got older, I knew I didn't like it, but I probably would have still have to conform. I mean, I did conform to it, but I'm trying to think back now. If I knew a bit more at the time, I probably would still have had to go along with it if I wanted to be part of that family unit, because that's the way that family unit worked. Yeah. But what I could have tried to do is not give all my power away from my mum, because I just desperately craved her love. So I just, you know, I did everything I possibly could to get some kind word, or, you know, at least something not horrible from her. And I gave all my power to her. Whereas actually, if I could have had, you know, that knowledge inside me that is her problem, her drinking is her problem, it's not me that's a bad child, because that's, you know, I just felt that I was a really awful child, otherwise she would love me and be nice to me. So I can understand all that now, but at the time I didn't. But I could still, and the other option is, which is what I did in my 30s, I just distanced myself. I didn't have any contact. My mum died about 3 years ago now, and I had a little bit of a contact with her, but not much over the 10 years before she died, because I just couldn't cope with it anymore. And I knew to build my own future, I had to distance myself. So when I mean, that's quite an extreme example maybe, but you have a choice of how you interact. The choices are all pretty rubbish, to be fair. One is you are complicit. The other is that you're complicit, but you keep your power. The other is what I did, which was I was totally complicit and I gave all my power away. Or you distance yourself. I mean, those are all pretty rubbish examples, but does that kind of illustrate the point a little bit?
I think you got around it at least pretty good. Yeah. There you always have a choice, and there's always a consequence, and sometimes the consequence is really bad. Like you say, you have to let go of someone. You have to say, either just distance yourself, or you have to say, hey, I don't want to be in this. If we want to be together from now and so on, then it has to be like this, because I cannot be in this anymore.
Yes.
There's always a choice, and there's always a consequence, and
there's
always a positive and negative consequence. So.
Yeah, and sometimes there's not necessarily a good choice, but you have to make the choice that's right for yourself. Exactly. So I chose that extreme example because I can't think of anything in between. I'm sorry, but
it's good. I like.
Yeah, but I think the main thing is learning for me to look inside. And for my own validation, and actually, what do I think? And that has been my,
and keep your power, like we talked about.
And that has been my key, the key to the new phase, the next stage of my life being so much better.
Exactly. So the awareness comes first. Like, where are you? What is going on right now in your life? And if you wanted to change, then how do I change it from this to what I actually want?
Yeah.
What choices do I have to make?
Yeah. And I think the awareness is always the first bit. The awareness that there might be something that is. So I always thought I was broken. I just couldn't do life. But actually, when I became aware that maybe there are things influencing me that I hadn't really totally appreciated, so that awareness that there might be something else, and there were things for me to delve into a bit more. So the awareness comes first, and then the noticing, because then you have to start looking at your behavior in situations, or situations where you feel triggered or something that's not going right, and go, oh, okay, so maybe there's something going on here. What is it? And trying to notice the patterns, okay, when somebody behaves like that, I feel like this. Or when somebody says something, I feel like this, or I react like this, and starting to notice that pattern. So when you've got the awareness and you are noticing what's going on, that's when you can start going, oh, okay, so how can I change that for me? You can't change the external thing that's going on, but you can change your own experience inside. And that's where I was going to say, that's where the work starts. I mean, the work starts actually with the awareness, but the change can happen. You know, change does happen, change can happen. It is absolutely possible.
You just have to want it.
You have to want it. And some people need a bit of support with it. I mean,
Definitely.
it's
not easy to do it yourself, because otherwise, like you said, you would have done it years ago if you if you could have done it yourself, right?
Exactly. I'd have got those two friends. I'd have got all those loads of two friends to help me, wouldn't I? And it wouldn't have lasted that long. Yes. Yeah, I think an external person who is there just for you, to just help you and help you with the awareness and the noticing, can be really beneficial. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been able to do it on my own.
Definitely. Me too. I also need one.
Yeah.
But there is a thing that I at least did many years ago when I started this, because it was also, you know, awareness. And the thing I always ask myself is why do I do this? Why do I feel like this? Why did this happen? This is kind of a journaling. It could be a journaling exercise to, when this happened, why did it happen? What happened? How did I feel? Like you say, to ask yourself these questions, and then you get to the bottom at some point, and then you have to go heal that and change it.
Yeah. Can I give you an example of that, actually?
Yes.
Something that happened to me. So I'd never really journaled. I did write a diary when I was younger, but it turned into what I'd had for tea and things like that. So I stopped writing a diary. But I did that too. Yeah. I started journaling probably when I started therapy, and I still journal on and off. I'm not a religious everyday journaler, but anyway, one day something happened, and we had people come to stay, and I decided that I was going to cook a really nice meal that evening. So there was me and my husband, my kids, one of my friends' son's friends was there, and these family friends. And I spent all day cooking, because we had some vegetarians, some non-vegetarians. So I was cooking all day, and I was making so much of an effort. And I was like, right, I'm going to make this really, really nice. This is me, classic. I'm a bit all or nothing, but you know, this is going to be a really nice meal. And by the time we all sat down to eat, everyone was super stressed, because I had been so in this is going to be a really great meal, and you know, and everyone's going to really enjoy it, and they're probably going to tell me how great it is. So by the time everybody sat down, it was like, oh shit, you know, like what's going to happen here? And it ended up being really quite awful, and I was devastated. And the next morning I woke up and I started journaling, and 8 pages in, like of just going, you know, so A4, 8 pages in, I suddenly realized what was going on. I was feeling really tender is the word that's coming to mind. I was feeling like I really wanted somebody to be nice to me. I really wanted somebody to make me a really nice meal, to show me some love and care. So in order to do that, I was doing that for other people, and I wanted them to be really grateful, so I could get that sort of, you know, feedback that I was needing to make me feel better. So rather than owning how I felt and asking for what I needed, I was giving everybody else what I needed, but they didn't know that. They didn't know what was going on. So actually, it was a disaster in the making from the beginning. But doing all that journaling really made me realise that why I'd done it was because is what I needed, and that really helped me step more into understanding what it is I need in the moment, and then learning to ask for it, which is not easy, but it
give
does
it
come.
to yourself, because like you say, you can't expect people to give it to you. You have to give it to yourself. If you need rest, you have to get that yourself. If you need love, you have to love yourself more. Everything.
Do you know what? Self-love, learning to love myself has been like a massive revelation. And the more I realize that, you know, I do love myself now, the more I see it in other people. I never used to see it before, but you can just see it when people do and when people don't, and there are a lot of people who don't, and I just, you know, my heart goes out to all those people now. But change, you know, a lot of podcasts I go on, you know, are not like yours, you know, because I'm talking to more of women like my age. But the whole point I'm trying to say is that change is possible, but actually it doesn't matter how old you are. Change is very definitely possible. And I think the greatest gift we can all give ourselves is to love ourselves and know who we really are, who our true self is, because I think then we have a much more authentic, if I can use that word, experience in life, because we're living it as us, who we truly are, rather than who we think we are supposed to be,
or who we think others think we should be.
There's who we, exactly, and those are two big influences: who we think we should be and who we think other people are expecting us to be.
Exactly.
Whereas actually who we really are is what really matters.
Exactly. And especially like now we talked about self-love, I believe that is the foundation for when we're working with confidence, when we're working with changing our life, mastering our life. It all comes back to, if you love yourself, you feel confident. It will naturally follow. If you love yourself, it's going to be easier to make these changes because you put yourself first, and you will do that for yourself. You're willing to do that.
I totally agree with you, because I think you can work on these other things, but unless there's self-love there, it's not actually, you've got to get to the core, I think. So I think you've got to get to the core, fill yourself up with love for yourself, and then the rest will come.
Because then you don't need to fit in to please others. Then you don't need to do all of these things to feel validated. You don't have to do all of that, because you're good enough and you're okay with yourself. And then if everybody else thinks that as well, it's just big plus. And if they don't, it's okay, because you have yourself. And you are going to live with yourself for the rest of your life. So that's the most important.
That's one of the favorite quotes I see going around the internet, that you know, you are going to, you know, the one person who's with you for all your life is you. So love yourself. Absolutely. And it's also another reason why a lot of the things that I hear about mindset drive me mad, because it's almost as though, you know, as long as you can flip your mindset, everything will be okay. And
it can be a start, and it can be like fake it till you make it, but still the foundation is
self-love.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, great. I think we should stop it here, because that's a completely different topic, and I think we got pretty much around everything. It sounds great. At least I enjoyed it. So
good. Yeah, me too. Thank you.
And hopefully we will see you again.
Cool.
on something else. So yeah, that's it for today, and we will see you at another time. Bye.
Bye.